I'm here to talk to you about Colorado Water Congress's strategic plan. That process began back last year, as you may recall, when we did a pretty comprehensive membership survey. And we presented the results of that survey to you last summer, and then the board has been very diligently working on preparing a strategic plan. Our original plan was to roll that in full detail out at this conference, and the board we did a board retreat back in June, and the board for 2 days, and so we worked on the strategic plan at that time. We wanted to take one more round through it, so we're going to do that in September, and the idea here is that we're going to present that to you in the fall through various electronic means, and we'll develop a member feedback process then with the idea that we're going to formally present and adopt the details of that plan at our January conference. When the Water Congress was originally formed, this was back in 1958, and for those of you that remember that, we were really coming out of a very serious drought, Nolan, the 54 through 56 period. And on the Front Range, that was really used as a design drought. There was a lot of concern there about where the state was really prepared. If you think about that, this was just a year after we were first created. I started getting created in 57 and formally created in 58. We really were just a year removed from that. The Dust Bowl was only 2 decades prior to that, and there was a concern amongst the water community at that time about whether or not we were really prepared. Coincidentally, at that same time, there was this was right after the 1956 Colorado River Storage Act, and at that time there was a west-wide scramble for dollars for federal projects. At that time, there was federal money. Remember those? There was money for federal projects, and there was a scramble for that money. And as we were seeking funding for a variety of different projects in Colorado, it was really important, and we felt we just did not have that unified statewide voice at the time. Many other western states had an organization somewhat like the Colorado Water Congress that represented its water community, its water users, and we didn't have one. And there was I think a lot of concern at that time that we were not able to speak with one voice. That's where all the stories of the historic big conflicts in the 40s, 50s, 60s came from. Having said that, though, there were a lot of our leaders at the time that really felt that despite the fact that there'd been conflict, there were a lot of things that we agreed on. These were people like Glenn Saunders and the Malcolms, the people that had really been involved in pretty intense battles, but they thought that there was a lot of things that we could agree on. And one of those things was that the Colorado water law at that time, they felt really needed to be modernized. And ultimately, that led to the 1969 Water Rights Administration Adjudication Act. They also felt that the groundwater laws needed to be strengthened, and we took several cuts at that in 65 and periodically thereafter. To try and strengthen our groundwater law. They felt at the time that our water administration tools were not up to modern standards, and that we weren't getting the data that was so critical to running our water systems here in the state. They felt that data and that information just wasn't handy, it wasn't available, and that if you can't administer your law systems, it's a real challenge to say that you're being fair to your water users. They also felt that the Colorado Water Conservation Board at that time was understaffed, underfunded, and did not have the ability to represent the state as we were, because the Water Conservation Board is our chief policy organization, and it's important that they have the funding that they need to accomplish their work, especially as we're dealing with interstate relations. And that was somewhat of my comment to Senator Sonnenberg the other day on making sure that the state has adequate funding for those things. They also felt that we needed from the public information standpoint, we needed to have a statewide program to explain how important water is to this state. And I want you to pay attention when Floyd's giving his talk next about the surveys that he just completed for one of our special projects. You will, I think that a couple of things that struck me was related to the public's opinion related to fracking. And there's been a tremendous investment with the study fracking and so forth on the benefits of fracking, but the survey there will be of some interest to you. We've also put a lot of energy on trying to publicize the Colorado Water Plan, and you'll find some interesting, I think, comments there from the public or just the statistics on how many people are really familiar with the water plan. Earlier yesterday, when we had Jennifer Persyke and Sue Sims here, the amount of investment that California has put into trying to educate the public just about water conservation, that one element of what we do is, Aqua's spending a statewide contract with the state government for $11 million. Sue Sims has got one where the Met has allocated $2.2 million. That's money that's right now kind of out of our budget and out of our reach. So the difficulty on reaching out to the public, and we've certainly created the Colorado Foundation for Water Education to at least in part take care of that. We've got through the Basin Roundtables and the Water Plan, we have the Public Education Outreach Program, PEPO. And certainly those things have made some strides, but the amount of funding that really takes to get to the 1.5 billion hits on just getting your message out is a real challenge today. When I was hired, there were a couple things that the board really wanted to focus on. One of the main concerns out there was that we wanted to make sure that we maintained our legislative record. Dick McRavey had spent a quarter century of his life building this organization's legislative record, and no doubt had done an excellent job with that. In that process, I think one of the things that the board wanted to make sure is that we maintained those relationships with the legislature, and a recognition that the legislature is enormously important to what we do in terms of and the work that they also do in setting policy. So maintaining that record, and I think we've done that over the 10 years I've been here. We've continued to maintain the legislative record, and we've maintained a very warm and cordial relationship with the legislature. Many of you are not aware that we do this, but this is the fourth year now that we've done this, is that we meet with the CWC board meets with the interim committee, and we have a breakfast with them. We had them on Wednesday, and just a chance for the legislators, the Interim Water Resources Review Committee, the 10 legislators that are on that, a chance for them to interact directly with the board and to make sure we're instilling that sense of accountability in what we do. The other thing that was extremely important was to build up our conferences, and over the last 10 years, the attendance at both our annual and our summer conferences have doubled. And as you can see from the attendance here, we're getting close to maxing out this facility, and that's due to you. It's due to your response to the programs that we're doing. And we've kind of evolved now, and you can now see it's kind of turned into a show. And the amount of investment there in technology and the work that Kelly Kuchera and Multimedia AV has done on helping bring our conferences up to a standard that's starts getting closer to meeting what my standards are. So I think that's been really good, and your response to that has been fabulous. The other thing that has been important to us was to build the organization's financial reserves, our strategic reserves, and to be there should we have a crisis of some sort that we need an immediate response to. We have also done that. We've gone through wet years, we've gone through dry years, we've gone through the worst economic downturn, or one of the worst in U.S. history, and that all has our reserves have continued to build. So we're continuing to build on that foundation, really, that Dick McCravey had built. And Kelly, if you can bring up my other slide. Oh, I can do that myself. One of the things that we were really also concerned with is diversifying our revenue sources. If you talk about or talk to many of the other associations out there, they get very concerned about trying to build up non-dues revenue. So if you want to know where the finances that come to run this organization, and this chart is from the year 2000, dues were right about 2/3 of our revenue source. Net event revenue, and the second largest check that we write every year is for food and beverage at hotels. What net event revenue is what we get from registration fees and sponsorships, and then what we send out to the hotels. We do have a small committee service charge, and we have some special projects. So what we've worked on over the last several years is to try to build and diversify the revenue sources. Is actually from 2014. And as you can see, we're starting to get a little more balanced portfolio of revenue sources, and that's been a major objective. So with those things accomplished, the board wanted to develop a strategic plan, and there's several keys to a success of any strategic plan. And one of those keys is that we get our members involved, and as we're looking ahead, that's something that we're going to continue to really push. You're going to see that over the next several years of continuing to find ways of involving the members. Our pond committee is an example, our first really concrete example of finding new ways for the members to get involved. We have a state affairs committee, a federal affairs committee, a water quality committee. But as we're looking at trying to continue to find ways to engage and get that commitment for members to volunteer the time, ultimately the success of this organization is not going to be about the executive director, or the staff and that kind of stuff. It's going to be about the members and the members being engaged in the organization. There's also needs to be a commitment to periodically review the plan. So the idea of the strategic plan is that we're going to review this every 3 to 5 years as conditions change. We're also going to tie that to an annual business plan that makes sure each year we stay on track and on target in what we do. Those are, and then the last thing I want to talk about is setting priorities. And we've certainly talked about this related to the Colorado's water plan. There's a lot of information in there, but we're a small organization as well. Right now we have, in addition to myself, we have 3 other employees. It's not and we have to invest a lot of that time in running an organization, but we have to be focused and dedicating time to those things that are our key priorities for us. When you see the strategic plan, you'll see 5 goal areas. The first one is the most important in terms of communications and partnerships. And that's certainly something that came out of the survey, that we needed to do more with communications. And I'll circle back to that in a minute. Policy development or advocacy has always been an extremely important part of what we do. And we'll be setting objectives in each one of these areas of the communication, partnerships, of policy development. Education and networking is really the events, and we've also started doing a lot of webinars now, and that'll just continue as we're looking at educating our members about the different things that the organization is doing and the things that you're doing. Governance is, without governance, you really don't have a stable organization. we're looking very carefully about governance, and we've developed a vision statement for how we're governing the organization. There's, I think even amongst the members, there's a lot of mystery about, how do you get on the board, or how do you get into leadership positions on the State Affairs, or the Federal Affairs Committee, or other committees. So there's a real commitment on behalf of the board to do be more transparent in what we're doing, and to be clear on how you get and work yourself for those that want to get into leadership positions, that there's a clear path, that we build that for the future, as our younger members are coming on, that we have a clear path for them to get involved in the organization. So you'll see the board, as we're continuing to move forward, to be looking at how each of our committees are governed, to have specific statements about why does the State Affairs Committee exist, why does the Federal Affairs Committee exist, and clear lines of authority on the work that they do. And because all these committees are creation of the board, and ultimately we're about accountability and making sure that these committees feel that they're accountable. Not that there's an issue there now, but we want to have that to be clear out there, and that we're also accountable to the membership. And then financial management, we've spent a little bit of time on already, but that's obviously without the strong financial management, we're in trouble. We're very lucky to have Keith McLaughlin from the Water Resource and Power Development Authority as our treasurer, and Joe Frank is our assistant treasurer. So we've really got, personally, I feel some really strong people with some strong financial background, helping make sure that we are staying on track. We will be looking at some long-range financial planning. One of the things that's happening with, we talked about net event revenue just a minute ago, and one of the things that's happening right now is that hotels are becoming much, much less negotiable on things like food prices. NWRA has their annual convention coming up in November in San Diego. Their food prices jumped 37% from the 2 years ago when they were there last to now. So the cost of hotels, the cost of putting on conferences and so forth is continuing to increase. And we've also, we're getting pretty much where we're maxing out our venues. They actually canceled our contract here for 2017 because the hotel has been sold and it's being converted to luxury property. And won't be doing conferences here anymore. So we will be at the Vail Cascade. We had a narrow window here and did negotiate a 2-year deal. So for the next 2 years, we'll be back at Vail Cascade. But that property has also been converted to a luxury property. We've just kind of gone in a little window right before that hits. You're going to have nice rooms when you get there, but we got a pretty decent price on it. But it's going to be it's a tough challenge. Back on communications, so what you're going to see is developing these member feedback loops and getting your opinions. You're going to get sick of me asking you what you think, but we need to continue to develop that into as robust thing as we can. The comprehensive membership survey that we did last year was our first step in that. One of my pet peeves about this organization, and I have a similar one about NWRA, is we don't spend enough time talking to you about what we're doing and what our other members are doing in support of the organization's mission. And we need to do a better job in that. And I think that's one of the key things that came out of our survey, was that we need to keep you better informed on what's going on around the state and what we're doing about it. There is, as we talked about informing the public, this is something that's going to really take a lot of thought about how we keep the public informed about the work that we're doing. And it's just incredibly expensive. Right now, we don't have the financial resources in place to really do a public engagement program, and that's something we're going to have to think about. Ultimately, it's likely that that's going to have to flow through you, and also through strategic partnerships with other organizations, such as the Farm Bureau, Colorado Municipal League, those kinds of organizations that we'll need to develop these strategic partnerships with, as I think we're probably working more with the grass tops of this organization. And the other thing is that we've got to continue to make an investment in technology and to keep up with this. It's just, you know, we've when I first came on, you know, we were kind of dealing with email, and then Facebook was coming on, and then Twitter. And now we're dealing with Pokemon Go. It's just absolutely amazing what changes are happening there. So to be making a continuing investment in the technology, it's been I think a big step for us to be able to, at least for our state affairs meetings, to be using and getting better at it, using the GoToWebinar kind of technology, the video conferencing, to be able to allow our members from around the state to be able to participate. Our state affairs meetings typically have half the people in the room and half are online. And I think it works about as best as we can. There's no substitute for being there in person, but many of you have to travel quite a distance and to participate and figuring out how we can do better at that. It's tough to even figure out what's going on with the different basins and so forth. It's hard for us to be able to right now communicate with what we're doing to give legislative updates, et cetera, to our basin roundtables during the legislative process. So we'd like to be able to continue to work on the video conferencing technology that's out there to try to shrink the state a little bit and make it a little easier for members without having to get in the car every time. Bruce Whitehead is our vice chair of our State Affairs Committee, and Bruce is on a plane. He feels strongly that it needs to be there. Before him, John Porter actually moved to Denver for 3 or 4 months, and Bruce would basically gives up half his weekend right now on Sunday to fly out to be at a State Affairs meeting on Monday morning, and then has a meeting and then has to fly back home. He's given up half his weekend, 20% of his work week, just to attend one meeting for an hour or two. So how we can continue to work in that and get you more involved throughout the corners of the state is really important. With that, so our next steps here is the board will have a meeting in late September, in about a month from now. We're going to continue to polish this plan a little bit before we get it out to you for your feedback, and we'll at that time roll out a process for how we're going to seek to get you engaged in this, because it's really important that the membership also have a commitment to the strategic plan and to carry forth the objectives and the purposes of the organizations which are paying resources to be a member of. So with that, that's this is my review of our strategic plan and where we're at, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.